Hey Bookends! Welcome to a 10-minute book review. I'm 10. Today's book review is going to be on Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Balli Kaur Jaswal. So we like to start off every book review with a star point, as in out of 10 stars, how many stars this particular book garner, and a rating, as in if this is a movie or a TV show, what would it be rated? So, star point, this is a 7 out of 10 stars. It was a really good read. Rating is kind of hard because if we don't include the actual stories written by the wives, which we don't get full stories anyway, but if we don't include those particular stories, then this book would be a solid PG-13. If we include those stories, then it goes you know, it could go to an R, but it probably would still be a PG-13. We'll go into that. So jumping right on in, the book stars Nikki. Nikki is a modern millennial Indian girl, well, woman in London, or I don't want to say London, but in England, where she was born and raised. She has a sister named Mindy. Now, Nikki and Mindy are polar opposites in the way that Nikki is more like, I need to do what fulfills me, even though I'm still trying to figure out what that something is. Mindy is more like, tradition is key, and so I want to do things the traditional way because that's what suits me. So they both irritate each other. Mindy is irritated that Nikki, the younger sister, wants to spend her time in unconventional ways, like working for a bar, living on her own, having premarital sex. And Nikki is mad that Mindy wants to have an arranged marriage, wants to stay at home until she's married, would rather get to know a man's family than the man himself, things like that. So the book really starts off with Nikki putting up a flyer for Mindy. So at their church, they're Sikh, and so at their church, at their temple, I think it's called a temple, they have this matchmaking billboard, and someone who's interested in being matched, they just put their information up on it. They tack it up. Yes, Mindy could have used a dating app, but she's like, there's so many dudes who aren't actually located in England, so she'd rather just do it at the temple because she knows that whatever match she gets, that person's already located in England. While Nikki is there, she sees a flyer on another board, a community board, that says that the community center needs a female teacher to teach an all-female widow class for writing, and at the end of the class there's going to be an anthology. So Nikki's like, cool, I dropped out of college, I'm bartending, this might be something I want to do. Now mind you, a lot of the choices that Nikki makes it seem like she's older than what she is. Like, I would have pegged her at like 26, 28, but she's actually 22. So she hasn't had a lot of living as of yet, and she still has a lot of living left. But I guess when you're in a community that expects you to get married early, because I was expected to get married earlier than I did too. I got married at 24, but the expectation was probably around 19, 20. So I was late. But yeah, she was in a community which expected certain things to be done by a certain age. So the fact that she was 22, unwed, no prospects, living on her own, and working at a bar was kind of a taboo. But no one really bothered her about it. It was just kind of a taboo. So she goes to speak to the head of women's affairs, I think it would be, who is Kulwinder. And Kulwinder she's an older woman, she doesn't really speak too much English. What kind of confuses me is that there's a whole community of Punjabi people, and I don't know if this is real or not. Like Southall, I don't know if Southall is a real place in England or not. If someone here's from England, you can correct me. But I don't understand how there can be a whole community of people who have been in a place for 20, 30, 40 years and aren't able to read read in English and speak in English. So that part confused me a little bit. Because in America, there's a lot of immigrants. In New Jersey, there's a lot of immigrants. And although English might be choppy, they still understand it after they've been here for a few years. And although English may be choppy, they can still write it after they've been here for like 20 or 30 years. But I'm thinking, this is just my guess, if someone lives in a community that is solely based around one particular nationality or one particular culture, then technically they may not feel the need or the urge to learn the language of where they are completely, because they can technically get everything they need done while remaining in their own safe bubble community. I'm thinking that's it. Could be wrong, but I'm thinking that is it. Anyway, so Nikki goes to start teaching a class, and she notices that everyone is a widow. She notices that some widows are younger than others, and she also realizes that none of these women know how to actually read or write in English. There is one woman who is more proficient than others, but her proficiency is probably at the same level of a first grader. So what she starts off with is trying to show them how to write, because she goes back to Kawinder like, bruh, you lied to me. I was hoodwinked. And Kawinder's like in her head like, yeah, I did kind of hoodwink her. But out loud she's like, you signed on to teach people to write stories. So if they don't know how to write, you have to teach them that too. Go on. So Nikki decides she's gonna go get some materials that she needs to learn, to teach people how to write and stuff and how to read. This is not something that she's very much aware of. Because keep in mind, she's 22, so she's barely out of someone teaching her how to do things, let alone being at a point in time where she's able to teach someone else how to do things. So, as the class progresses, she ends up buying a book as a gag for her sister. It's kind of an erotica, a romance erotica. I don't know that it's romance, but it's definitely erotica. And she buys it as a joke for her sister because her sister is a bit prudish. And she forgets to take it out of the bag with the other books that she bought for the people to learn how to write. So when she steps out of the classroom for a few minutes, she comes back in and she sees that Sheena, the woman who knows how to read, enough, reading the book to the other people in the classroom, the erotic book, and translating it into Punjabi. And so Nikki's a little bit embarrassed, like, bruh, that wasn't for y'all. That was for my sister. It was a joke. They're like, why would this be a joke? This is some good stuff. Why would it be a joke? We want to write these stories. So they end up agreeing that they're going to write erotic stories, which in my mind, in the beginning, the first time I read this book, that was kind of weird to me. Because, like, why would these old ladies be writing erotic stories? But then it reminded me of something an old woman told me before. Old, not cold. So I guess even when someone hits a certain age, they may not be able to do what they used to do, but it doesn't mean that they don't think about it. And also, too, it's not so far-fetched because these women are sexually experienced. They're widows. So they've been married, they've had sex, they've had children. Some of them have had children. But they've gone through those experiences. So obviously they would know how to do certain things, and they'd also have fantasies in regards to certain things, whether they were fulfilled or not. So these women make up these different stories, and I do want to point out that even though the name of the book sounds salacious, what one culture sees as culturally salacious or culturally taboo doesn't necessarily translate into taboo to another culture. Case in point, as an American reading this book, I did not find the content to be taboo. The worst thing that they mentioned was nipple. And when I was listening to the narrator read it, because I've read the book and I was also listening to the audiobook, when I heard the narrator reading that word, it just sounds so irritating because she's like held onto that word hard. Like she just fell in love with that. I don't know. Anyway, that is the most salacious word that's mentioned. It's more so fluff than erotica. So it's really not erotic. It's more so fluff. All genitalia is referred to by fruit or some flowery term. Not fruit, I'm sorry. A vegetable or some other flowery term instead of the actual thing it is, or the street name for it. So, in my personal opinion, as an American, it wasn't a story of, it wasn't a collection of erotic fiction written by these women. If anything, it was a collection of fluff stories that someone who perhaps had an active imagination or had never been sexually active or had been sexually active and never been sexually adventurous might find to be remotely interesting. I don't know. See, the story itself is great. It's just, as if you know me or if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I'm ace. And so when it comes to things about sex, yes, I can understand them. Yes, I can identify with some of them, but I'm also not very moved by them. If that makes any sense. I'm not like, oh wow, that was hot. Let me go. No, I'm not like that. I'm just like, oh, that was a very good and accurate description of what goes on. But yes, that is... I'm more of an analytic when it comes to reading things that are like sex scenes and things like that. And from an analytical point of view, what the widows were writing wasn't exactly erotic or erotica. It was more so just interesting fluff from fantasies that they've made. Apparently, though, this is frowned upon. So the widow starts sharing this information with other people. It's like, yay! But it's frowned upon by these people called the brothers. The brothers are kind of like the moral police. So they're not sanctioned by the sheiks. The sheiks aren't like, hey, we're going to get all these guys together and they're going to make sure these girls stay chaste. No, the Sikhs weren't about that. It was these unemployed dudes who had nothing better to do with their life or time but to look at girls and be like, you don't seem chaste. Get chaste. Put something on your head. Yeah, so that's what that was. So there's that aspect of the book where Nikki is showing these women how to write, and in turn these women are writing these very erotic stories. Well, not very erotic, but in their definition of erotic, they're writing these erotic stories. And also through these stories, even though these women are widows, it's helping them to kind of put closure on certain things that have happened to them. Not all things bad, but just perhaps very plain marriages or marriages that sexually didn't give them what they were looking for, but they were in anyway. Also, it's helping people who are married kind of juice up their sex life. So I found that to be interesting as well. And interestingly enough, Nikki's mom is a widow. She's not a part of this group, but she's a widow. There's also a sub-story going on here. There was a girl named Maya who is Kawender's daughter. It's said that she committed suicide because of not having a great relationship with her husband, and she brought shame to his family. And how it's said that she committed suicide was throwing was it petrol or something? They call it petrol, but I guess gasoline on herself and lighting herself on fire. Now, let's just be real for a moment. In this 20th, 21st century, who gonna say, I'm gonna commit suicide by fire? With so many different, there's so many bodies of water in England. There are so many different things, like, there's so many easier ways to die. Who's gonna be like, let me pick the hardest, the slowest, and the most painfulest way for me to kill myself? It didn't make sense. And Kawender agrees that doesn't make sense, but the police won't reopen the case because they said, well, we have a suicide note from your daughter. And they're also saying, she's also getting these mysterious calls from someone saying, like, you better stay away from the police. You better let sleeping dogs lie. You better, like that. And so she's scared. Her husband is just kind of, he feels just horrible because it was their only child and he loved her a lot. So there's like those two things going on. There's the actual story, the contemporary story about the widows opening up and finding pleasure in a world where there wasn't much to be found, and also showing that there's more to them than just old women walking around, and also the mystery of what happened to Maya, both of which are very interesting. What I particularly liked, I don't know much about Sikh culture. I have two friends from high school, but they are Indian, but they're not Sikh. They're Muslim, I believe Muslim Buddhists or Buddhist Muslims. So I don't know much about the Sikh culture, but I do know that people often make it out as though people, pardon me, from those kind of communities hate women or dislike women or hate their daughters or wish their daughters were sons. I love how this book showed that a lot of the men had daughters. And for the most part, yes, there were some people who felt like, well, actually one person who felt like, you know, he wanted to honor kill his daughter. But for the most part, the men were loving towards their daughters. I would say loving towards their wives, but in all honesty, I think culturally love looks different. I hate to say it that way, but culturally love looks different. What looks like love in my culture might not look like love in someone else's. And so because of that, I have to kind of move away from what I would see as a loving relationship and kind of allow myself to be brought into what would be considered a loving relationship in this instance. Like for me personally, if I'm hurting, a loving relationship for me would be my husband coming over to comfort me, to hold me, to tell me everything's going to be okay. A comforting relationship in this is if someone is hurting, for them to kind of be left alone to do whatever chores or duties they were going to be doing before. And that's considered loving. It's giving someone space. It's allowing things to continue on the way they were, even though they're not quite the same. So I'm not going to go as far as to say that the relationships weren't loving, because I honestly, since I'm not from that community, I don't know what a traditional loving relationship would look like through the lens of someone who grew up as Sikh or in a Punjabi community. I honestly don't know. But I will say that if what I was seeing was a projection of what love looks like, then it's not bad. It's not particularly what I would have wanted, but it's loyal. I'll say it like that. It's loyal. What I will say is some of these hoes ain't loyal. Oh, I shouldn't have said it like that, but oof. Okay, so there's one woman, I'm not going to give it away, but she is the biggest prude in class. She's like, y'all shouldn't be talking about that, and y'all shouldn't be writing about that, and y'all gonna get in trouble for doing all that. Let me tell you this. The biggest freak always got the loudest voice about what everybody else shouldn't be doing. Let me just say it like that. I'm getting a message. But yeah. So when you go into this book, because if you read this book, which I hope you do, you'll see who I'm talking about. Once you see what her life was about, you're gonna be like, okay. It was a pretty good book. There was a bit of meandering. I wish that the mystery about Maya could have come together a little quicker. But I do recommend it. Of course, not for kids, but yeah, I do recommend it. Kind of put me in the mind of the Joy Luck Club, just because we have these women who are in these long-suffering relationships who are more than just long sufferers. Yeah. Well, this has been a 10-minute book review. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Bye, Bookends.